their face structure has changed over the last several weeks or months. So Ozempic is one of these medications that helps you to lose weight. But the the thing about that is you don't want to lose weight too fast because if you do, you don't give your body time to change and adapt and to catch up to it. So Ozempic face, right or wrong, is really seeing people's faces change drastically because of too much weight loss or weight loss in too short of a period of time. The most common thing that a lot of people have seen when they lose a lot of weight and get the quote unquote Ozempic face, or another name of it is called a peanut head. So so you get a little bit of a peanut head. But it's basically as the head kind of starts and then it curves in and then it fills back out and it curves back down. And the most common area that people kind of lose the weight from is right here in that temple area. So really, you can kind of see, even with aging, you may even see this in a grandparent or a great aunt or great uncle. As they get older and their diets kind of slow down, you see a little bit of the indention of the skull right here, where you can tell something used to be there, but it's not anymore. And that's muscle. Muscle used to be there. If you see, the pictures of children in, Africa, starving countries, things of that nature, a lot of them have the face structure where there's bone, but there's not a lot of meat to fill in the bone area. So here, also kind of like underneath the cheekbones here, and definitely fat underneath the neck here. So those three areas, to some degree, almost kind of in a third world country, would signify some level of wealth. So, if you have these areas pushed out, then you must come from a place where food is not a scarcity for you. So now we're seeing the same thing in America. We're seeing very rich, very prominent people with the same deficits as you would see in a third world country. And so why is that? That is because Ozempic, specifically Ozempic, really makes you want to turn away from eating. And so when people turn away from eating because of the feeling of nausea or feeling of being too full, then they just drop all their calories. And they drop too many calories too fast. And we'll talk about that in a little bit. Why is that such a bad thing? Dr. Fitch, I thought cutting calories was supposed to be the thing I was supposed to do, right? Calories in to calories out. Yeah and no. So, that's my best answer to that. There is a time and place to cut calories, and then there's a time and place to make sure that you have a sufficient amount of calories on board. We recognize that we are basic creatures of nature, basic mammals that have to go hunt. Now, our bodies are very well equipped to be able to tolerate anything that we want to eat. We can tolerate meat. We can tolerate plant. We can tolerate anything that we want to eat and turn that into some kind of nutrients without it killing us. Right? I mean, no other creature can do that. I mean, your own dog can't eat chocolate behind you. He'll die. But we can eat darn near everything if we don't have a significant allergy to it. But with that being said, all that does boil down to some kind of calorie that comes into our body. And so then those calories stack up. And for the longest time, we thought that the accumulation of all these calories equated to our weight or having too much weight. So we came across a time period, probably like I don't even know when it started, the 60s or 70s, where people were like, well, calories in, calories out. So why don't I just decrease my calories, and then I'll just learn how to live off of 400 or 500 calories in the course of a whole day, or maybe 800 calories in the course of a whole day, and it should all balance out, right? Well, no, it doesn't. You saw some initial weight loss, yes, you saw some initial weight loss, but then over time, that weight loss basically went away. And matter of fact, it either plateaued or you actually started gaining weight, even though you didn't start eating more food. So a lot of people tend to go into gaining weight very similar in the fact that they are taking in too many calories. Now, you've come through a talk with me, and I probably asked you the question: are you an overeater or are you an undereater? And we've kind of had that question. A lot of people say, Dr. Fitch, I am an overeater. Personally, myself, I am an overeater. I like to play let's stack the plate. I like to play let's go back, so I don't have to put away leftovers. Let's get it all done today, right? But then at the same time, I am to some degree an undereater as well. I will go several hours without eating. So I may have breakfast, but on a work day, I'll go from 8 o'clock all the way to 5 o'clock without eating, and just kind of driven off of the adrenaline of my work. So I'm kind of like a mixed bag. So when I eat, I overeat, and when I don't, and when I work, I don't really think about eating. So I'm kind of like a mixed bag for like most people probably are, that's in our group. But let's specifically talk about the overeater. So the overeater, big portion at breakfast, big portion at lunch, big portion at dinner, probably some snacks in between, right? Lots of calories, lots of calories. This is a great person that semaglutide or the brand name Ozempic or Wegovy is it's their ideal client. It's the one who they're probably best suited for. It is a GLP-1 medication. GLP, what does that mean? Glucagon-like peptide. Peptide just means man-made, right? So back in your grandmama or great-grandmama's day, when she was a diabetic, the doctors, they were taking insulin out of animals, trying to dilute it, and then give it to your forefathers and foremothers, and they had a lot of side effects from that, didn't they? Matter of fact, a lot of people, a lot of cultures swore off insulin. I'll never take insulin. I saw what it did to my grandmama, or so on and so forth. But what they don't realize is that over the years, labs have come up and been able to create those hormones without having that same side effect or reaction. And we call those peptides. So peptides, and the insulin, we got a lot of people take insulin nowadays, don't seem to have that same side effects. If I could just get a person to take the shot, they realize, oh, it's not that bad, right? But that is a peptide. That is a man-made version of a natural hormone. So insulin says eat. Insulin tells your stomach to open up. So if that's happening, then glucagon is told to shut up. And glucagon's job is to tell us that we're full, is to tell us that we don't need any more food in the pouch called the stomach. And so one is winning on this seesaw of life, insulin or glucagon. So we assume that if you're overweight, you got more insulin in charge than you have glucagon. And so with the GLP-1 medications, Ozempic, Mounjaro, Wegovy, Zepbound, we're essentially giving you a booster shot of glucagon. Now you got way more glucagon than you have insulin. And the GLP-1 medications do one of three things. Number one, they make your stomach tighter. You don't want to eat more food, otherwise you're going to get nauseated. Number two, it's going to slow down your digestion, so you're going to feel fuller longer. And number three, it's going to stop you from making so much internal sugar as well. Now, Ozempic is best at 1 and 2. Terzepatide or Mounjaro is best at 2 and number 3. Today, we're really only talking about stage 1 and stage 2. These are the people who eat en masse, right? Because if you're just a little picky eater, a little bird eater, semaglutide ain't gonna do nothing for you, right? You're not gonna fill up your stomach enough to, and I don't care if it's good food or bad food, right? You're not gonna fill up your stomach enough for the semaglutide to be effective enough to tighten your stomach up, right? I know tons of people who put in a lot of calories in just 3 bites, right? Whether that's a milkshake or some candy or some chocolates or some carrots, a handful of carrots in the wrong time is a bad thing. But with that being said, again, we're really only talking about our overeaters. So when I get my traditional overeater, I can give them a dose of semaglutide, and they can go from eating a meal about this size to now only a quarter of that meal, and then all of a sudden they're full. They don't want no more food. No, if I look at another bite, if I think about another bite, I'm gonna feel full. I'm gonna feel nauseated. I might even get, I might even vomit. Hate to be graphic, excuse me. But with that being said, that does help them to start pushing away from the table. And after a couple of days or after a couple of weeks, they actually learn that, hey, they can eat in smaller portions and still survive, right? The question is, why did they get to eat in such big portions to begin with? That was trained into them. That started when they were young children, young adults with their parents, their grandparents, their culture. Somebody taught them to eat in these large portions. So now reprogramming them and teaching them how to eat in smaller portions is totally against their will, totally against their mind. But once we actually put the governor on, they're very surprised that, wow, I actually can eat half a sandwich and be satisfied, or a quarter of a sandwich and be satisfied. So with that being said, next thing you know, now I can turn off their entire appetite. And that's what happens for a lot of people. A lot of people, that food noise, that constant noise to eat food, to be happy, to be satisfied, is silence. And so now they can have a small breakfast and they can skip the snack and their world not be jeopardized. They can skip lunch or have just a small lunch. And you undereaters, they're probably eating just like what you're eating now. But nobody's ever trained them on what are the best things to eat in those small portions. Now, most of us that are probably undereaters know that if you're going to go for a long period of time without eating, you got to still maintain your protein. You still got to maintain your protein. And that's one thing that most people, when they change from going from eating a large portion to now only eating small, they don't know. And I mean, it's not unlike other people when they go on their diets. What's the most common diet that most people go on? Anybody want to take a stab? Most common thing, when people say that they're going to diet, the most common food they start to eat is what is it?
I say either low calorie or keto.
Okay, but what's an example? What's the food? What's the most common food that people eat when they start going on a diet?
Salads.
Yeah, salad and chicken. That's it. Salad and chicken. And salad for the most part. Every time, a salad for the most part, guys, has nothing in it. It has nothing in it. It's just basically water and a vehicle. So there's no calories in it. There's no nutrients or vitamins in it, anything at all. So it's just nothing but pretty much just water. So water diet. So water diet with something that you actually can crunch on. Cheryl, you had a question?
Yes, when you say you have the overeaters and the undereaters, but what if you have a person who eats once a day but eat a large meal? What is that considered? That what category would that fall in?
Yeah, I still would call it an undereater. I still would call it undereater because, like, guys, when you eat food, it doesn't matter how much food you eat or how little food that you eat. That food is only bioavailable. It's only good for life for for the next 4 hours. So even if you eat a large amount, you eat a large amount. Now you can still get a lot of calories on that, but it's not going to be as much as the next thing that we're going to start talking about, which is going to be our macros. And so you're going to have a large side effect all day long with not eating as compared to that one large meal, probably more towards the end of the day, right? So let's take that segue right on time, Cheryl. So we went from people who overeat and they eat a lot of calories to now they're probably under eating or eating now a good amount of calories or a very low amount of calories, right? Because that's how you want to lose weight. You want to lose weight by decreasing your calories per day. And if you don't know how to calculate how many calories that you should be eating a day, a good method of doing that is say, hey, let me take the weight that I want to be and multiply it by 10. That's a great way to do it. Now, a person will say, well, that's a lot of calories. And that is true. Like, for example, for myself, I want to be closer towards 220. So if I did that, I would say my diet calorie intake would be 2,000 plus calories. Right now, everybody knows that if you want to go on a diet, you got to be at 1,500 calories or less, right? That's what all the books and media and everything else push. 1,200, 1,500. Nobody has ever heard of 2,000. And the simple reason for that is because of the next topic that they don't take into account, your macros. So in that calories, which is just the overall accumulation of all your macros, and your macros consist of four things: your protein, your carbohydrates, your fats, and then a lot of and then your micronutrients. So that's number four, but I'll push that off to another category. So we'll stick with the top three categories: protein, carbohydrates, and fats. So for the most part, your carbohydrates are your source of fuel. Okay, and to give an imagery to this, I tell most people that life is like an airplane ride. So an airplane needs to get off the ground really, really fast, right? Have you ever seen Top Gun or any of those shows? They got to hit it and get up into the air ASAP. So that's a lot of fuel that they're burning. Once they hit cruising altitude, most people don't hit the afterburners in life at this point. So most people are just cruising and then they come in for the landing, or we call that death. So you need a lot of gas, a lot of carbohydrates to get off the ground. You need strong wings, protein to stay in the air, and then you need good landing. You need good landing gear or vegetables to come in for a good and even landing, right? So that's usually kind of how I think about my macros. So the problem is that most of us are still consuming carbohydrates as though we're still getting up in the air, although we've already reached cruising altitude. So that's how we're gaining weight. we're taking in way too much carbohydrates in our total calorie pocket versus our protein. Now, I told you your protein is important for your wings or your muscles, right? You don't want to get older and trip because you can't pick up your legs and now fall and break a hip or lose the strength and reaching behind you to reach for a bag or a purse out the back seat, and then a muscle tears or so on and so forth. So we got to maintain our muscle mass as best as possible, and then we can go into our fats and all that stuff as well in order to continue to maintain our hormones, basically our fine tuning of our body. But with that being said, your protein is totally vital. But when most people cut their calories, when most people go into this Ozempic diet and they say, well, I can't eat but so much, the things that they eat are generally not protein. So they're probably getting full off of some rice, or they're getting full off of some breads or other things, maybe some fats, maybe some other different types of carbohydrates, but they're not getting full off of protein. And they're nowhere near reaching their protein allotment for the day. And if you don't know what your protein allotment should be per day, then you need to be setting up an appointment with me so we can be having this conversation. So with that being said, if you don't give your body the amount of carbohydrates, the amount of proteins, the total amount of calories that it needs to use in the course of a day, then next thing you know, your body starts to make its own sugar. It makes its own fuel. Cheryl, you alluded to this earlier. You said, which one is worse? Not eating all day long or having that one large meal towards the end of the day? Would I consider that an undereater or an overeater? And my biggest concern would be not eating all day long. Because when you're not eating all day long, then now your body has to make its own sugar for you. Had you had breakfast, you wouldn't go through this process they call gluconeogenesis. Instead, whatever you ate for breakfast would give you life for the next 4 hours. That should take you up to lunch. That should take you up to 4 or 5 o'clock. That should take you up towards bedtime. And so if you were to eat, then you could calculate how much sugar were you bringing into your body based on your own intake. But when you skip a meal, your body makes its own sugar. And since it's doing this out of crisis, it generally makes 3 times to 5 times too much sugar than what it should have. I'll give you an example. Since I worked in the hospital for many years, especially with children, I saw a lot of diabetics. And I saw a lot of type 1 and type 2 diabetics. And type 1 diabetics they have an illness they usually call DKA. This is where the body cannot make any insulin to put into the cell. So the cell thinks it's starving. It's the same thing as if I were to skip a meal, right? There's no sugar for the insulin to put into the cell, but in this case, there's no insulin to put the sugar into the cell. Those two things have to go together, just in case you don't know. Sugar and insulin have to go together. So if one is not there, then there's no way to refuel that cell. When that happens in my type 1 diabetics, their blood sugars go into the 400 to 500 range. So this is the equivalent. If you were to eat a meal, your blood sugar would probably go up about 100 points. But if you and I were to skip a meal, your blood sugar would rise up at least 300 points as you make your own blood sugar. This is what I saw time and time and time again in the hospital, and what we're trying to prevent. But now here's the big question. Where does your body get the tool to make all that sugar? It destroys your own body's muscles in order to make that sugar. I should have made that a question to see if anybody wants some extra points on that. But you eat your own body muscle in order to turn that into the sugar that you need to stay awake, simply because you decided to skip breakfast, simply because you decided to skip lunch, or so on and so forth. Over time, there are some of these muscles that there's not a lot of muscles there to begin with, right? And they atrophy away, they get eaten away, and now the face looks sunken in. But this is not just happening around your face. This is happening around your arms, your legs, your heart. And people, and this is something people really, really, really need to understand. When going on Ozempic, am I losing fat? Yes, you are. But if you're not protecting yourself, if you're not taking in the good amount of protein that you should be, then you are also losing some muscle. And that's not what you want to do. So we always tell all of our clients, if you haven't had this conversation with me yet, you need to. We need to talk to you about how much. Do not skip meals altogether. And a matter of fact, increase your protein intake through ways like protein shakes and other things. Many of us can go a whole day without eating. We can say so busy and not even think about eating. But this is not the time to do that, because you want to make sure that you give yourself that protein. For people who are not on semaglutide, it's still a bad idea to do. But generally, when those people go and they eat, they refuel at the end of the day, they overeat, right? So they eat a good portion towards the evening or whatever that mealtime is in order to catch up. Versus if you're on the semaglutide, remember, I've already put the governor on how much you can take in at one time. That's why I'm a big fan of the liquid diets. So the protein shakes, maybe not the tropical smoothies, right? Not tropical smoothie, a lot of sugar in there, but you can make your own protein shake. Matter of fact, I usually have one of my protein shake jugs around I can show you, but you can go to a store like the Vitamin Shop or GNC and purchase one. Somebody sent me a picture of one that they order off the line and asked, was that okay? And I told them yes. So you just want to look at the back of the label. As long as it says that the per serving is about 20 to 25 grams of protein and less than 5 grams of carbohydrates, I'm probably going to give my thumbs up to it. Okay? So just make sure that you're getting a good amount of protein in, at least 1, 2, if not 3 of those shakes or scoops per day. And I say scoops because you can actually double scoop, right? Your body can actually take in. Now, there's a limit on how much protein your body can take in. So you can actually take in about 50 grams of protein at one time. So if your goal is to get 100 grams of protein in a day, that's 1 double scoop drink in the morning and 1 double scoop drink in the evening. You got your 100 grams in all right there. So versus saying, oh my gosh, it's going to be so complicated and so drawn out. No, it can be made very, very, very simple. So if you can get 50 grams in 2, 3, 4 times a day, then you can definitely see how you can maintain your protein intake and avoid getting the peanut head or the Ozempic face, as they've been calling it. So Monique, now you know what Ozempic face is.